We're here with David Disraeli. He is the personal CFO and the creator of the FlexTrust LLC. Now, I'm not going to try to fool anybody. I don't know what that means. Can you explain it to us?
I'm glad you asked. The FlexTrust LLC is essentially a trust-owned LLC. Normally, people form LLCs either with their individual names or with another entity where you can discover their names or their identity. The FlexTrust LLC, since it's a trust-formed LLC, where the trust is the only member and the trust has whatever name you give it and it's not filed anywhere, it's effectively anonymous. So nobody can find out who is behind that LLC, giving you anonymity and privacy.
So you're kind of a ghost owner.
Yes, I guess you could call it the Ghost LLC.
Right. And what's the upside of that? What's the biggest reason that someone would want to do this?
Well, I've found that clients that have 2 or 3 properties or a significant amount of net worth, they want privacy. They don't want people to be able to get online and find out what they own. And I'll give you a perfect example of why that's important. Let's say that you're my client and you're going shopping at H-E-B, and on the way out, you run into somebody. You exchange insurance information, and it doesn't really matter whether it's your fault or it's their fault. They go home, and they decide they have a neck problem or a back problem, or the little jar in the parking lot aggravated their problem, and they go on to the websites that are publicly available. They find out that you own 4 or 5 properties and 2 or 3 LLCs, and they start thinking, maybe I don't want just the insurance limits. Maybe I want to go after this person. That's one reason. There's many others.
Now, is that just a hurdle that someone would have to get over? Could they eventually find out, or is that just a dead end right there?
Well, as it is now, all they need is a cell phone. They can do it in the parking lot on the way out, and they can find out a whole lot of information. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Right.
But let's suppose that they find out that you own an LLC and your name is all over it. They can find out where you live and become a lot more interested in coming after you.
Right.
The alternative is to find out that the LLC was formed by some trust that's never filed anywhere, and you cannot determine who the founders are or the originators. So they're completely anonymous.
That would require a court order of some kind, I'm guessing?
That's right. You'd have to actually sue the LLC and demand that a judge order the registered agent to reveal who the owners are, who the managers are.
So this is really a high net worth people. This is a really good idea to prevent exposure.
That's correct.
Right.
Although some people that have one property don't want people knowing about it.
Yeah. What if I live in one of their properties and I want to find out who the owner is? Is that if I have a big problem with say I'm renting from them, can I find out who the owner is?
Well, typically people will have a property management company, so you would still have to decide you're going to file a lawsuit. And after you file the lawsuit, enter into discovery to find out who actually owns that LLC or that property. So you'd have to really want to go after them. And at that point, all bets are off.
Right.
But remember, privacy can come into play when you have a bad business deal, or you get into it with your partner, or you have a traffic accident that completely has nothing to do with the real estate itself.
Right.
And they can find out that you have several $1 million of net worth, which is totally optional at this point.
And this is something that you can set up for people.
I do it all the time.
You do?
Absolutely.
And is there no paper trail on it?
There is no paper trail on it. Well, there's one exception. Let's say that you already have 10 properties, because I've done this before too. And you decide from this point forward you'd like to have some privacy. So we create this vehicle, and then we move the properties into the vehicle. So from that point on, if you go on to, say, the local county appraisal district, your name is not going to show up anywhere, but the deed transfer, if you dig deep enough, will show up. The problem is, when you're looking at a deed transfer, you don't know when it says transfer to XYZ LLC, which is owned by an anonymous trust, who that is.
Right.
They don't know if it's you or it's somebody else.
Right.
So there is a paper trail, but nobody will actually know for sure unless they actually go and file a lawsuit. And if you do, get sued, then all bets are off anyway.
Right. And now you said when you move it into this vehicle, that vehicle being the FlexTrust LLC.
Correct.
Right. And what is the process of that? If someone were to come to you, how do they need to prepare for something like that?
Normally, we start off with a list of their assets, their business interests, their existing LLCs or corporations, and decide what the best strategy is. The next step is to form the trust, which, by the way, has all sorts of other benefits for disability, for estate planning, for avoiding probate. But once that trust is in place, then the trust becomes the founding member of the LLC. So when you get on the Secretary of State's records, if you know even where to find them.
That's what I was going to ask you, because you said earlier anybody with internet access can find out a lot of information. Is that where they go? Is the Secretary of State?
Well, there's actually two websites. One of them is accessible to anybody with internet access. Mm-hmm. The second one requires a subscription to the Secretary of State's website where we do business and we make filings. It's not expensive. You just have to know how to get in there. Mm-hmm. Once you're in there, you can pull up the formation documents for any entity in the state of Texas. And on that document, it's going to tell you who the registered agent is, and that's the person that receives the actual lawsuit or any kind of official notice, mm-hmm. and who the managing member is. So if the registered agent is a friend of yours or a company, you can hire a company to do it, and the trust, which is never filed anywhere, is the managing member, then you're dead in the water.
So there has to be someone, you mentioned a lawsuit, there has to be someone that the lawsuit has to be given to, right? And who would you recommend that person be when you set this kind of trust up?
I do it for my clients. There's companies that are registered agent companies that charge like $100 a year, but every Secretary of State in the United States, all 50 states, require some human being be available at a physical address, not a P.O. box, to receive service of process. Okay. This could be a cease and desist letter, or it could be an actual lawsuit. The registered agent's job is to call the managers or the officers of that entity and let them know, they've been served. Right. That's their job.
You probably hope you never have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you had to?
Not yet, no.
Oh, that's
basically,
good.
I get junk mail and one notice a year from the comptroller's office. Otherwise, it's just really a filing mechanism for me.
Is this a very expensive thing to get going? What are the costs involved to have you do something like this?
By the time we're done, it really depends on how many properties are involved, but I've done it for as little as $3,000 or as much as $6,000. It really depends on how complicated.
Case by case.
I've done some that have multiple states, and each state has their own filing fee. I can't control some of those costs.
That was my next question. You can do this in any state, not just the state of Texas?
Well, we form the main structure in Texas mm-hmm. because Texas is a very business-friendly state. There's no annual fee to have an entity in Texas. There's only one filing fee. However, if that Texas entity owns property in, say, Alabama, the state of Alabama says you're doing business in our state.
Right.
If you're doing business in our state, your Texas entity has to register with us, which is $150.
Gotcha. So I want to let people know how to reach out to you if this is something that they would find good for them. But can we just recap real quick?
Sure.
Just real quick, the FlexTrust LLC, the upside is?
The upside is the ability to own a business or a business that owns real estate anonymously. Mm-hmm. Period.
Period. So it's to avoid any exposure that might come with something completely unrelated to the business or properties that you own. Someone looking for a payday.
I would say yes.
Right.
As we said earlier, it doesn't mean you can't be sued or you can't be held liable, but we're going to put as many hurdles mm-hmm. in the way as we can.
Gotcha.
So yes, if somebody's bound and determined, they can sue you and they can capture assets. There's no way anybody can escape that. But the more hurdles that are in place, the less likely you are to be sued because
right.
your name's not everywhere, and the less likely somebody is to actually prevail, because LLCs by themselves offer an enormous amount of asset protection.
And how do people reach you, David?
My website is www.pcfo.net. That stands for the personalcfo.net. And my phone number is 512-464-1110.
And there's more information on a website?
there is a great deal of information on the website.
Okay. They can read more about the FlexTrust LLC.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff. It's good seeing you.
Thank you.